Today, we are going to make some grass. No, I'm not in Colorado, so it's not going to be that kind of grass. It's our techniques that are so simple and sensible, your models will practically build themselves.
Everybody, welcome to the Kit Hoarder Stash, and today we are going to build and paint the Grim Reaper by Moebius. Now, we reviewed this kit a couple of weeks ago, and we're just going to look at the parts layout here real quick before we get going on the build. You see how it's supposed to look. So here is the main body, two pieces, these really nice looking headstones, which two pieces each. It's a very simple build. Just cut it off to sprue right. There's not a lot of sink marks, anything like that. Not a lot of extra flash. You see the tree here, the parts for assembling that tree. And it actually builds pretty good. There's a few little gaps, but we'll address those. Here's the display base, which is definitely a nice little display base for it. And these are the plants that are supposed to go on it, but I'm not going to use those because I got a better idea. And some of the miscellaneous parts that were in the box that just kind of fell off. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take my can of 2X gray primer. We're going to prime the whole entire thing, and then I actually took a flat black just to spray the figure himself. All the other painting I did with just either craft paint or some smaller model paints. So here's the materials we're going to be using. We'll go into some of them into more detail here in a minute. But on the base, you glue all these components together and put them on the base. I mixed up just a green, kind of a medium green. I put a little bit of glue in with it, and I went ahead and put it all over the base. After I painted that all over the base, I went ahead and put on my static grass, and we'll go into that material that I used here in just a minute, but you can see that I've already gotten this far in the steps. So instead of the plants that were in the kit, I'm actually going to take these. I got them off Amazon for like 12 bucks for a couple of dozen of them. And these are just some little plastic palm trees, not really in any scale. I'm going to just lop the tops off, and we're going to use those as our plants, as our ferns. And then I've got this late fall foliage from Woodland Scenics. It's kind of a stringy material, and that's what I'm going to use on the tree. We're going to make this very simple today. I'm going to put this together in about 5 hours. Here is the static grass that I'm going to use, the Harvest Gold. It's kind of a medium length that I'm going to use for the grass, if you will, or the ground cover on the base. So I've got the tree assembled and painted it in just kind of a chestnut brown as the base. And you can see not everything fit quite perfect, and I'm okay with that. I wasn't going to try and make this thing absolutely perfect. Hey, it is what it is, so I'm okay with how that looks. So went ahead and primed it, painted it the chestnut brown, waited for that to dry. Then I'm going to mix up just some black and white, either craft paint or acrylic, but this is an acrylic, and get the gray that I want. Nice thing with mixing it like this on my own, I can lighten it or darken it real quickly. And just went over it with a dry brush technique to give it those gray tones, maybe add a little bit more white to give it some areas of a lighter gray tone, and then maybe some black to give it kind of a third gray definition, if you will, just so that there's some contrast in it before we go ahead and put our foliage on it. For the headstones, well, they were simple. Just assemble them, painted them with the primer gray, and that's all I did with that. Then I went ahead and started with my Larry's bath water, giving it a wash, which gives it some tonal variation, but also gets down into these cracks and crevices. And then I took some of that gray and just a little bit of a brush, a little bit on the brush, and made these streaks like how rainwater would do. You can see that we've taken some of the orange. So I took some of that orange ground cover, just put it around the base of the tombstones. You can see this one probably turned out a little bit better as far as my straight down weathering technique. This one looks a little bit better. The other one I couldn't quite paint a straight line, but it's just those dry brushing with the grays, and it really, in my opinion, makes it pop and look more like a like a tombstone. So dry brushing and a wash does wonders. Okay, so I just glued a little bit of that orange ground cover on the ends of the tree, and it's actually still drying here in this photo. I could have done other flocking. There's a lot of things I could have done, but this was quick and easy. I think it's going to be fine for what I'm doing here. You can see I've used a little bit of decorative bark that I have in my stash and used some of that on the ground cover. And you can see how the ferns turned out. Again, they were just dry brushed with a little bit lighter green and super glued into place on the base. Here's a little bit better view of the overall. I just painted the scythe silver. I used the same chestnut brown on the pole, whatever you want to call it, the staff. So you can see with this orange ground cover, and you can use whatever color you want. It just kind of tears out. It's fibery. Put a little bit of glue, white glue, on the ends of the tree and just stuck it on there. So again, for the purposes of what I'm doing, this will be fine for me. You can do whatever else you'd like. So I went ahead and mixed up that gray, and we dry brushed the entire thing here. We've already given him a wash, as you can see, on his skull and on his hands. And I think the first time the gray is a little bit too light. I think it's a little bit too heavy. From a distance it stands out well, but up close I'm not quite real happy with it. And that's the beauty of using these acrylics and mixing it on your own. You can go back, add a little bit more black, or if you want it lighter, you can add a little bit more white, and you can change how sharp those edges wind up being, which is what we've done here. You can see now that they're a bit grayer, and you can see how the skull turned out. I've hit the hands and the skull with a little bit of white highlight, but definitely you can tone it down or up, whichever direction you want. For the belt, I went ahead and watered down a little bit of that chestnut brown and put that on the rope belt. Well, here he is with the hourglass connected to his belt. Just painted the frame of the hourglass with a black acrylic. On the ground cover, I went ahead and used my static grass while the paint was still wet. Remember, it was paint and glue mixed together. The problem was I couldn't get my applicator close enough to really get the good static-y stand-up effect, which was fine. I held it upside down for a couple minutes. Everything was good. So I think it turned out okay. And there you go, quick and simple. Thanks for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed this.